They teach you in training that the forest is neutral, a vast, indifferent system of biology. They say it doesn't care if you live or die. I've been a ranger for 15 years, and for most of that time, I believed it. It was just a place of trees and dirt, governed by seasons and predictable patterns. But after what happened last fall, I know that's not true. I know the training manual is a lie, a comforting story we tell ourselves because the truth is too terrifying. After dark, the woods are different. They awaken. They take on a will of their own, a deep and ancient intelligence that watches from between the trees. Sometimes, it feels like they want you to get lost, like they're hungry for you to take a wrong turn. It's my job to protect this place and the people who visit. That's what the badge says. But sometimes, my real job is just to survive the shift, to act as a witness to things I can never report, and to keep the border between their world and ours from fraying any further. And that night started like so many others had, with a call about a couple of lost hikers who had wandered off the path. My life is pretty simple, a rhythm governed by the seasons and the steady, reliable weight of my gear. That evening was the start of my night shift, a string of 4 that always left me feeling disconnected from the rest of the world. The sun was bleeding out behind the peaks, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. The day shift guys were clocking out, their faces sunburned and tired. They smelled of sweat, sunscreen, and the bug spray they hand out to tourists at the front gate. They were going home to their families, to warm meals and television. My day was just beginning. My office is a small, cluttered room in the main station, a log cabin building that always smells of pine cleaner, stale coffee, and damp wool. Getting ready for patrol is a ritual, a mental and physical checklist that grounds me. The heavy, flame-resistant pants, stiff and reassuring. The solid clunk of my issued boots on the worn wooden floor. Every piece of equipment is a tool with a history. The heavy-duty flashlight whose beam has cut through 1,000 nights. Extra batteries, always checked. A backup flashlight, because one is none. A headlamp, for when I need my hands. My sidearm, a Sig Sauer I keep meticulously clean, but have only ever drawn twice in 15 years. Neither time on a person. A multi-tool that's done everything from fix a loose wire in the truck to pull a porcupine quill out of a crying kid's hand. My pack is always ready. A 40-pound extension of my own body. A comprehensive first aid kit. High-calorie emergency rations that taste like chalk. A water filter. Mylar blankets. Road flares. And 100 feet of kernmantle rope. Last are the electronics. Our fragile link to civilization. A satellite phone for the dead zones where the radio is just a box of static, and my GPS unit. Its screen a glowing map of a world it only partially understands. My patrol truck is a forest green government workhorse, its thick tires caked with mud from a dozen different service roads. The engine has a familiar guttural rumble that's been a constant companion in the loneliest hours of the night. As I pulled out onto the main park road, one of the day guys, a kid named Miller, gave me a lazy 2-finger wave from his own truck. The unspoken message was always the same. Stay safe out there. Don't let the dark get you. A typical night is mostly about presence. It's a slow, deliberate crawl. I drive the service roads, my headlights carving a temporary tunnel through an ocean of darkness. I look for the telltale flicker of illegal campfires or cars parked in deserted pull-offs where they shouldn't be. Mostly, I listen. I listen to the sounds of the forest transitioning from its day self to its night self. The bird song dies, replaced by the yip of coyotes and the haunting calls of owls. There's a kind of profound peace in it, a feeling of being a small but accepted part of something immense. For the first 2 hours, it was just that. A deep, uneventful quiet. I checked the North Ridge campground, where the only signs of life were the glowing embers of a few sanctioned fire pits. Then I drove out to Miller's Overlook to scan the valley with my binoculars. Everything looked normal. No smoke, no distress signals, nothing out of place. I was about to log it as another quiet night, feeling that familiar mix of relief and boredom, when the radio on my dash crackled to life, breaking the spell. Dispatch to Unit 4. I picked up the handset, the plastic cool against my palm. This is Unit 4. Go ahead, Cindy. 4. We have a report of 2 overdue hikers. A male and a female, early 20s. Names Sarah and Ben Miller. Last seen heading up the Granite Quarry Trail around 3 p.m. Their car, a silver sedan, is still at the trailhead. I glanced at the truck's digital clock. It was almost 9 p.m., 6 hours overdue. That's a serious cause for concern, especially with nightfall. The quarry trail is a moderate 4-mile loop on paper, but it gets tricky on the backside, where the trail markers are old and the path fades into game trails. It's notorious for turning people around if they don't have a map and a compass they actually know how to use. Understood, dispatch. I'm about 20 minutes out. What were they wearing? Did they have any gear? There was a pause, and I could hear the clicking of Cindy's keyboard. Negative on the gear, 4. The reporting party was the mother, Carol Miller. Said they went for a quick afternoon hike. She listed shorts, t-shirts, and sneakers for both. The mother also said something odd. She was on the phone with her daughter right before she lost service. Her daughter was laughing and said they'd found a strange old playground in the middle of the woods. I frowned, my knuckles tightening on the handset. A playground? Cindy, there's no playground anywhere near that trail. The closest one is in town, 10 miles away. That's what I told her for. Mother was insistent. Said her daughter sent a photo, but the call dropped before it could come through. She sounded pretty worked up about it. Could be they took a wrong turn onto private land, maybe some old homestead. Could be, I said, but a cold knot of unease started to form in my gut. It was a detail that didn't fit, a piece from the wrong puzzle. In this job, you learn to pay attention to the things that don't fit. Those are the details that get people killed. All right, dispatch. I'm on my way. I'll check the trailhead and start a preliminary sweep of the first mile. Keep my channel open. Roger that, 4. Be careful. I hung up the handset. The dense woods lining the road suddenly looked different. The darkness between the trees wasn't empty anymore. It felt heavy, watchful. A playground. The thought was absurd. I've hiked almost every inch of this forest, mapped its forgotten logging roads and game trails. I thought I knew all its secrets, but the woods are old, far older than any map, and they hold on to things. The night wasn't peaceful anymore. It had a purpose, and so did I. The Granite Quarry trailhead was empty except for a single silver sedan, just as dispatch said. It looked lonely under the cold white light of the single parking lot lamp. I parked next to it and killed my engine. The quiet that rushed in was immediate and absolute. The first thing I did was run the plates, which just confirmed the car belonged to the Millers. I shined my high-powered flashlight inside. 2 empty sports drink bottles, a crumpled tourist map of the main park attractions on the passenger seat, a phone charging cable. Nothing that told me anything I didn't already know. They were just kids. I suited up, shrugging on my pack. The familiar weight was a small comfort, an anchor in the rising tide of strangeness. I switched on my headlamp, its brilliant white beam cutting a sharp cone into the oppressive dark. Stepping away from the truck and onto the dirt path always feels like crossing a threshold. You're not just looking at the woods anymore. You're in them. You're on their territory. Ben! Sarah! This is Park Ranger Search and Rescue. Call out if you can hear me. My voice sounded small and thin, swallowed by the vastness of the trees. I stopped and listened, straining my ears. The only answer was the whisper of the wind through the high pines. I started down the trail, keeping a steady, ground-eating pace. My headlamp beam swept back and forth in a practiced rhythm, painting the ferns and tree trunks in stark light and shadow. Every rustle in the dark undergrowth makes you pause, hand drifting to your belt. Usually it's just a deer bounding away or a raccoon scurrying up a tree. Usually. I kept up the calls every few minutes. Ben, Sarah, can you hear me? Still nothing but the wind. About 1.5 miles in, a flash of color on the edge of the trail caught my eye. I knelt. It was a pink granola bar wrapper, half hidden under a fern. It was the organic brand the mother had mentioned they bought that morning. They'd come this way at least. I swept my light across the ground. The dirt was packed hard, too hard for clear prints, but I saw what I was looking for. The faint scuff marks of athletic sneakers, not hiking boots. I kept going. The trail began to climb, getting rockier and narrower. This is where people who aren't paying attention get into serious trouble. A twisted ankle in the daylight is an inconvenience. In the dark, Miles from your car, it's a life-threatening emergency. I was nearing the 2-mile marker, the point where the trail becomes a confusing network of switchbacks, when the first truly strange thing happened. The woods went completely quiet. It wasn't a gradual fading. It was instantaneous, like someone had thrown a switch and cut the power to the entire forest. The crickets, the wind, the rustle of small things in the leaves, everything just stopped. An absolute heavy silence descended, so profound you can hear the blood pulsing in your own ears. I've felt that unnatural stillness before, usually in the moments right before a big storm hits, or when a predator like a mountain lion is close. It's the sound of the entire forest holding its breath. My hand rested on the cold, checkered grip of my sidearm. I unclipped the safety strap. "Ben! Sarah!" My voice was a hammer blow against the silence, sounding way too loud. This time, I heard something back, a sound that didn't belong. A woman crying. It was faint, drifting from off the trail, deep in the trees to my left. "I'm coming!" I yelled, my voice tight. "Keep making noise so I can find you!" I pushed off the trail, leaving the safety of the known path and plunging into the thick, dark brush. Thorny branches scratched at my face and tore at my clothes. The crying came again, closer this time, a desperate, gasping sound. But there was something else mixed with it now. A melody. It was a tinny, broken tune, like a wind-up music box playing from far away. A happy little children's song that, in this place and at this time, was the most deeply unsettling sound I had ever heard. The crying stopped abruptly. There was only the music. Something primal in my gut, the part of the brain that still remembers being hunted, screamed at me to turn back. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. But I thought of the 2 hikers, cold and lost. It's my job to help them. I pushed through a final thick wall of tangled rhododendron and stepped into a small circular clearing. The air here was frigid, a pocket of unnatural cold. It had a weird metallic smell, like old rust and damp soil. My headlamp beam landed on a swing set, It was ancient and rusted, the red paint peeling off in long strips. 2 swings with cracked wooden seats hung from the crossbar. They were swaying back and forth slowly, in perfect synchronized time, but there was no wind. The ghostly music seemed to be coming from them. This had to be the playground Sarah told her mother about. It made no sense. It wasn't on any map, official or otherwise. It couldn't be here. My light swept past the swings. At the far edge of the clearing, Ben and Sarah were leaning against the trunk of a massive, gnarled oak tree. They weren't hurt. They weren't crying. They were just standing there, side by side, staring at the empty, swaying swings with wide, vacant eyes. They looked like sleepwalkers, or dolls placed there for display. "Ben? Sarah?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. They didn't move. They just kept staring at the swings, their heads tilted at the same slight angle. I took a cautious step toward them, and my boots crunched on something that wasn't leaves or dirt. I pointed my powerful light down at the ground. My stomach lurched. The ground of the clearing wasn't covered in leaves or pine needles. It was a thick, matted carpet of hair. Animal fur and long, greasy strands of human hair, black, blonde, red, gray, all woven and packed together like felt. The rusty, coppery smell was overwhelming. I felt bile rise in my throat. "Ben, Sarah, we have to go, now." I reached out and grabbed Ben's shoulder. His skin was ice cold, a deep, unnatural cold that had nothing to do with the night air. He snapped his head toward me, his eyes suddenly focused and filled with a frantic animal panic. "The stairs," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "We have to use the stairs. He said it's the only way up." "What stairs?" "Ben, there are no stairs here," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and authoritative, a beacon of sanity in this madness. Sarah turned her head slowly with a creaking, unnatural motion. She wasn't looking at me, but past me, back the way I'd just come. "You can't see them?" she asked, her voice sounding like a confused, frightened child's. "They're right there. The tall man told us to wait for him here." I followed her gaze, turning and shining my light back into the trees, into the spot where I had just pushed through thick brush. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. Where there had just been dense, tangled woods, there was now a staircase. It looked as if it were carved from a single piece of polished bone-white material that seemed to swallow the light from my headlamp, creating no reflection. The steps were perfectly formed and immaculately clean, a piece of sterile architecture dropped into the filth of the forest. They just went up, rising past the tops of the tallest trees and disappearing into the black, starless sky. They weren't supported by anything. They weren't attached to anything. They were just there, an impossible intrusion into reality. And standing on the third step, as if he had been there all along, was a man. He was unnaturally tall and thin, wearing an old, dark, formal suit that was frayed at the cuffs and shoulders, like it had been worn for a century. But it was his face, or lack of one, that made my breath catch in my throat and my blood run cold. There was nothing there, just a smooth, pale, blank expanse of skin where his eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. And yet, I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, he was looking right at me. Right. The music from the swing set stopped. The absolute silence that crashed back in was 1,000 times worse than before. The faceless man tilted his head, a slow, curious, bird-like gesture that was utterly and completely inhuman. My radio, silent for hours, suddenly blasted a deafening roar of white-hot static, so loud and violent it felt like a physical blow. I flinched and slapped a hand over my ear, the sound drilling into my skull. It only lasted a second, but it shattered the moment. When I looked back at the stairs, the man was gone. The static cut out as quickly as it had begun, leaving a painful ringing in my ears. In that same instant, Sarah let out a raw, terrified scream that tore through the clearing. Ben stumbled back, his eyes finally wide with the horror of it all, no longer vacant. The spell was broken. They weren't just dazed anymore. They were hysterical. My training kicked in, a lifetime of drilled responses overriding the part of my brain that was screaming in pure terror. There's no protocol for a faceless man on an impossible staircase, but there is one for panicked, hypothermic victims. The mission became brutally simple. Get them out. Right now. With me! Move! I yelled, my voice cracking but firm. I grabbed each of them by an arm, their limbs feeling stiff and cold. I half-dragged, half-pushed them away from the ghastly swing set and that obscene carpet of hair, back toward where I thought the trail had been. The woods were no longer quiet. As soon as we left the clearing, the sound started. An orchestra of malice. Branches snapped just behind us, always right at the edge of my headlamp beam. A low, guttural breathing, wet and heavy, seemed to pace us. First on our left, then impossibly on our right. A strange, discordant whistling sound echoed through the trees, a twisted, mocking version of the music box tune from the clearing. "He's following us!" Ben shrieked, stumbling over a root. "He said not to leave. He said we were chosen." "Don't look back," I ordered, my voice a harsh bark. "Keep your eyes on the back of my jacket. Do not look back, just keep moving." I risked a glance at my GPS. The screen was dead, a blank black rectangle. I pulled out my compass, the one piece of gear that never fails. The needle wasn't pointing north. It was spinning in a frantic, useless circle, completely untethered from magnetic north. All my tools, all the technology that gives me an edge against the wilderness, were useless. It was just me, two terrified kids, and my memory of the forest. But the forest itself felt wrong, malevolent. The geography was actively changing around us. Familiar-looking trees blocked paths that I knew should have been open. The ground felt soft and spongy in places, like it was trying to suck my boots down into the earth. We ran on pure, high-octane adrenaline. Sarah was sobbing uncontrollably. Ben kept muttering the same phrase over and over again. "Too many steps. The door is at the top. Too many steps." Every shadow thrown by my bouncing headlamp looked like the silhouette of that tall, thin man. Every gust of wind through the branches sounded like it was whispering my name. The forest wasn't neutral anymore. It was hostile. It was hunting us. Then, through the cacophony of terror, I smelled something that didn't belong to the nightmare. Wood smoke. The simple, comforting smell of a campfire, not the acrid smoke of a wildfire. Hope, fierce and desperate, surged through me. I shoved the kids in that direction, fighting through one last wall of bushes. We burst through and fell onto a hard-packed dirt path. It was the main trail, It was solid and real under my feet, and 50 yards down the path, I saw the soft, welcoming glow of my truck's cabin lights, which I'd left on by force of habit. The awful sounds from the woods stopped instantly, as if we'd crossed an invisible line, a property border. Behind us was that other place. Ahead of us was the real world. Ben and Sarah collapsed onto the trail, their legs giving out. I hauled them up one last time and practically threw them into the truck, cranking the heat to full blast. I wrapped them in the crackling Mylar emergency blankets from my pack. They huddled together in the passenger seat, shaking violently. I grabbed the radio, my hand trembling. "Unit 4 to dispatch." The response was immediate and crystal clear. "Go ahead, 4. We were starting to get worried. Your radio went dead for over an hour." "I have them, dispatch," I said, my voice shaking so badly I barely recognized it. "I have the subjects. They're safe. Suffering from shock and mild hypothermia, but they're alive." I paused and looked in the rearview mirror at the solid black wall of trees, requesting medics meet us at the ranger station, and tell them to make it quick. On the long drive back down the mountain, nobody talked. Ben and Sarah just stared out the window, wrapped in their silver blankets, their faces pale and haunted. I didn't ask them what happened. I didn't want to know. And what could I even put in a report? Encountered non-Euclidean architecture and a faceless entity? At the station, the bright fluorescent lights felt like an attack. The paramedics took over, their calm professionalism a strange contrast to the madness we'd just escaped. My supervisor, a good, decent man named Dave, met me at the door. "Good work, son," he said, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "What the hell happened out there? Your radio silence had us ready to spin up a full search and rescue team." I looked at him, at his tired, rational face, at the world of paperwork and procedure he represented, and I knew I couldn't tell him the truth. He'd think I was crazy. He'd have me put on administrative leave, sent for a psych evaluation. I'd lose the only job I've ever known. So I lied. It was the only sane thing to do. "We got turned around," I said, the words tasting like ash. "My electronics failed. Compass was acting up, must be from the iron deposits in the old quarry. The hikers got disoriented and panicked, probably hallucinating from the stress and the cold." It was a plausible story. It was a neat and tidy lie that fit perfectly into the boxes on the official incident report form. He nodded, accepting it without question. "Happens. It gets weird in the dark. Get some coffee. Write it up while it's fresh in your mind." I spent the next 2 hours typing that report. A meticulous work of fiction designed to keep the world sane and orderly. Found subjects disoriented and suffering from exposure. No mention of stairs to nowhere. No mention of a carpet of human hair. No mention of a tall, faceless man in a suit. I never saw Ben and Sarah again. I heard through the grapevine that their family packed up and moved away a few weeks later. They refused to talk to anyone, friends, family, therapists, about what happened that night in the woods. It's been months now. I still patrol these woods. It's my job, but I don't go near the granite quarry trail after dark anymore. That whole section of the park is now a blank spot on my personal map. Sometimes when the night gets too quiet and the wind is just right, I think I can hear a faint, tinny music box tune drifting down from the high ridges. I've never gone back to look for that clearing. I don't want to know if it's still there, waiting. I'm afraid that if I look for it, I might find it. Or it might find me. These woods are full of stories. Most of them are filed away in a metal cabinet under unexplained or inconclusive. If you want to hear more about what I've seen out here in the dark, the things I can't put in my reports, consider subscribing. And if you have your own stories from the deep woods, the kind that make the hair on your arms stand up, share them in the comments below. You'd be surprised how many of us have seen things we can't explain, how many of us have stood at the edge of the map. They teach you about wildfires, about dangerous wildlife, about carrying the right gear. But there is no training for this. They don't have a protocol for when the map is a lie and the compass just spins because the laws of physics have been temporarily suspended. They don't teach you what to do when you meet something that looks like a man but isn't. Something that comes from a place that exists just outside our own. My job is to protect this forest, but I know now that some parts of it don't belong to us. They never have. Some parts are owned by things much older than the trees, things that see our world as nothing more than a place to hunt. The woods change after dark, and that night, I learned they can change you too. Now, when I stand at the edge of my shift and look out at that solid black tree line, I don't just see a forest. I see a border. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to my very soul, that I've stepped over it, and a part of me never came back.